So with the year wrapping up, we're going to reflect on the biggest issues of the past 12 months and look forward to what 2024 is going to have in store. Joining me to discuss are Alberto Vasallo, President and CEO of El Mundo Boston, Ronald Mitchell, publisher and editor for the Bay State Banner, Joan Vernacchi, columnist at the Boston Globe and a member of the Globe's editorial board, and Mike Dean, a reporter for Axios Boston. Thank you all for being here. I want to start by going around the circle, I guess partially a physical circle, partially a virtual circle, and asking each of you to identify one story that you think is going to be especially big heading into the next year. Alberto, what is your pick? I know it involves the migrant crisis. What are you interested in watching as the migrant crisis unfolds?
Oh, we've just seen the tip of the iceberg. This is just the beginning of this story. These folks that have arrived here, we've been addressing where they sleep, basic, but how these folks are going to get kids into schools, where it's going to be the long-term solution, how they integrate in the society. We're going to experience a lot of what the border states have been experiencing, clamoring about for many, many years. This is the first time Massachusetts has had to really deal with the reality that there's not enough beds for all the people. That's a saying in Spanish. No hay cama para tanta gente, and that's going to continue to be the issue at least for the first half of the year.
When you and I were talking about this the other day, you mentioned that the reactions among Latinos who are already here in Massachusetts to what's going on right now, that they're very mixed, right?
It's an uncomfortable conversation that someone has to bring it up to light, but yes, you do have folks who have been here for many years, and they watch the news, they'll hear it on El Mundo or whatever, and they say, I'm Colombian, why does the Venezuelan have a right to shelter immediately? Why is their ability to work being processed faster than ours? And there's no understanding, and there's a little bit of a conflict. That is happening in the community now, absolutely.
Joan Vernacchi, you wrote a column a little while back about the state's commitment or lack of a commitment to finding shelter for everyone who needs shelter. How do you see this shaking out moving forward?
Well, what I think is this is forcing Massachusetts to really kind of look in the mirror and decide who we are versus, who we think we are. It's easy to demonize, the states like Texas and Florida and how they've dealt with the migrant situation. But, this has kind of brought out the best and worst in the people of Massachusetts in terms of whether we're going to keep the right to shelter law and what does that really mean. And I think that I wrote a column the other day about how the emergency department in Mass General is under a lot of stress. And I got at least one email from someone saying that's the migrant issue. So I think it is going to be a really big issue in the months to come.
Mike, how do you see it playing out, especially on Beacon Hill, where I know state lawmakers have on occasion expressed some frustration with what they're hearing or not hearing from the Healey administration. It took a while for that supplemental budget that included funding to help deal with this to pass. What do you see happening moving forward?
Oh, you're right. Definitely, the communication between the Healey administration and lawmakers was a big focus. What we were hearing on the Hill, I think that they have met that to a certain extent. I think that at least Democratic lawmakers are a little more satisfied with knowing what's going on in their communities, where people are being housed, kind of what the Healey administration approach is going to be. Certainly, the ties that were put to the last funding bill, where Healey has to kind of report to them. There's a little bit more supervision so that the Democratic leadership will know where this money is. And that's certainly an issue that isn't going to be going away as we see kind of more money pumped into the system through the budget.
Because these numbers, I mean, they're already straining the system, pushing the system past capacity, but they're supposed to just keep going up and up and up, right?
Right, and that's kind of where the legislature is now as well, is setting up kind of overflow shelter space, preparing for even more people to arrive. That was part of what the House and Senate put in that last supplemental budget bill.
All right, Ron Mitchell, you're going to get the last word here. If you wanted, any thoughts on how the migrant crisis might shake out in 2024?
Well, I think that there's going to definitely need to be more synergy in the way that they address migrants overall, because there are many migrants that come from Afro-Latino-based communities, Haiti and other countries, that feel like they've been put at the back of the line and the immigration has been stifled with other folks.
There we go to your point,
the
Alberto.
same folks, you know, and the same. So I think folks in our community are going to be looking for that synergy to make sure that everybody has the same starting place in line and has the same opportunity to receive the benefits of an immigration process that's not elongated and, you know.
But that's not how the system is right now.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It
It's
isn't.
really, you know.
So I'm anxious to see.
And
you
may
know,
not be how it is.
But I like what Joan said, right? And I kind of piggyback on mine. This is what other states have been dealing with, you know. One thing is to say, you know, you're one way. Another way is to actually have to deal with it. So it's going to be very interesting.
Ron Mitchell, I want to give you the second chance to identify a story that you're going to be watching with great interest in the coming year. Yours, I know, and I think I stepped on you a little bit at the outset. I should have found a way to hint at where you were going without saying it involves the migrant crisis. So I'm going to try to do that with you. It involves the city and the way the city makes policy. What is the story?
I know for our community that the Bay State Banner serves, many folks are very concerned about how the city interacts with the community in reference to the O'Brien issue and other public spaces, the new White Stadium mutual use agreement with the new soccer team. And I know that many folks in the community are feeling like the process hasn't included them. I know that the mayor did a great job bringing in Michael Cox as the new police commissioner, and that yielded fruit with the police contract. The police officers I've talked to are very happy. The community activists I've talked to are very happy. It was a good medium. Everybody felt respected. But it seems like that type of synergy has not, you know, been transformed into these other issues like O'Brien and stuff like that.
We should back up a little bit just to make sure that people know what we're talking about. Some of our viewers will, some of our viewers will need a refresher. The O'Brien is a school in the heart of Boston's black community. And Mayor Wu has proposed, it's the O'Brien School of Math and Science, correct?
Yes, it's one of the best, and well, it's one of the high schools that has some of the highest level of education, and it focuses on math and science.
And the mayor has proposed moving it to West Roxbury, which is not in the heart of Boston's
That is
black
right.
community.
And I
Very
think
different
that
neighborhood.
in talking with the activists I've spoken with, I think the concern is that you have one of the best high schools in the city that's known for higher learning. There's still a little residual issues over the Boston Latin issues that happen with the race and the feeling of being left out of that process. That still lingers. So now we have another Boston public school that is proposed to be moved out of the community, you know, and it's being viewed as a removal of resources. Now, of course, they had to upgrade, you know, they're proposing to upgrade Madison Park. It needs more space. There are some upsides to the option. But again, I think it was an unforced error because of the way that it was rolled out. And I know that there were many community activists that met with the mayor yesterday. There was supposed to be a protest. It actually turned into a meeting, I understand. And that there are some other options on the table now. I think that that engagement process has happened.
And White Stadium, just really quickly, we should mention, it's the stadium in Franklin Park had played host to the city's football teams for decades. And now, given this new women's soccer team that is being rolled out, we've learned that football teams are not going to be able to use the field during the women's soccer season.
Yeah. It seems like, and I haven't had a chance to understand from the very beginning where the rubber met the road on this issue, but there was a really nice mutual use agreement from the theory where you share the stadium with this professional soccer, women's soccer team. It provides revenue to fix up the stadium, and it's shared with other sports teams.
I remember the mayor touting that as this great, you know, we're doing a professional team.
Somewhere in the process, they forgot to overlook the fact that if you play football on a field and you have cleats, you pit up the field and you can't play soccer the next day on the same field. So to me, it just seems, I'm not sure where the miscommunication happened, but now they're proposing that the high school football teams that have always played, and that's been their home field, that for half of the season, they're going to have to play and practice in another field.
Right.
And again, it feels like a little disconnect from, again, not communicating and not dotting all the I's and making sure everybody's on the same page.
I want to give, and shame on me for not doing this earlier, I want to give you three a chance to weigh in on this if you want to. One thing, when I was talking with Ron about the question of whether there was enough community input solicited before these moves were floated, I was reminded of the way the whole Olympic bid shook out when Marty Walsh was mayor. And it seemed to me, I said to Ron, it seemed to me at the time that there was a decision made by the Walsh administration, we're going to do this, we're going to make this bid. And now we are going to seek community input, by which we mean we're going to tell you all why this thing we've already decided we're going to do is a really great idea and why we're going to go ahead and do it. Is that too simplistic a take, or is it fair to say that politicians have a tendency to make a decision quickly about what they think is going to be smart or the right way to go, and to maybe push the community input to a later stage than it could otherwise have occurred? Joan, I think you may be the right person to start.
Chomping at the bit here. I think it's a good analogy, but in this case, I think it may even be, kind of worse in a way. This really impacts a certain community. I don't know if the moving of the O'Brien is a good idea or a bad idea, but it's an idea badly executed with the lack of community input. And it seems to be taking something very precious and valuable from a community that deserves, to have it. So, I think it's a bad idea to move the O'Brien. As far as the White Stadium thing, that's a little bit more complicated. I think, I'm all for the football teams being able to play there. I'd be a little bit concerned about that professional women's league coming to some sort of agreement with the Kraft Group, which wants to build a stadium in Everett. And you don't want to lose everything. You don't want to sacrifice everything. I think you need to, satisfy the community on that score, but don't be too quick to, try to turn that into something that doesn't happen. That would be my impression on that one.
Mike, Alberto, I want to give everyone a chance to float their big stories, and we're moving a little more slowly than I'd intended. But before we move on, anything you want to add on this particular topic?
Well, I think it's just funny. Very briefly, I think I joked to Michelle Wu at an event where I roasted him. I said, I remember when you used to be a progressive, because now it seems like she's doing what the white male counterpart was doing, except she's lucky because she's not being accused of systematic racism. Now it's just making decisions. So,
what was the mayor's response when you made that quip?
She just laughed.
I really think that folks in the community, and I'll make it quick, I really think that folks in the Black community are open to the concept of public use and private partnership. I think that concept overall is one that everybody's open to. The question is, how do you execute it? Do you minimize the use in a way that takes away an activity that, high school sports is very important to people, and that Friday Night Lights, that's a brand, and even if we don't think of it in this state, it is important for those kids and those families to have that type of commitment, and there's a long legacy in that space. So you've got to really think hard about that when you put those partnerships together.
Mike Dean, anything to throw in before we move on here?
It's kind of the trend that we see with executives and the element of surprise. We see this with Healy and the lawmakers, Wu and her stakeholders, and of course, going back to Marty Walsh and the stakeholders that would have been involved in the Olympic bid. The element of surprise is not always great for an executive to just launch onto constituents like that.
On to our next topic, which is going to come from Joan. We're back to the state political level. What is the story that you are keen to track heading into next year?
Well, I have no idea if this is going to be a big story or a nothing story, but I think I was interested in the Republicans, that tiny little band on Beacon Hill, flexing their muscle a little bit in the whole vote over the supplemental budget. We've certainly had Republican governors, Weld, Romney, and of course 2 terms of Baker, but the grassroots of the Republican Party has been dead. And that was really true under Jim Lyons, the rightly maligned head of the state GOP. Now we have a new head, Amy Carnival. There seems to be like a little bit more energy. And while I don't agree with their agenda with that sub-budget, which was basically to kind of try to make a big issue out of the money for the shelter appropriation, I do think that there is a real cause in bringing, demanding that the Democrats be more transparent and open about the way they do business. They've just gotten away with a lot of arrogance and doing things behind closed doors. And if that tiny band of Republicans can change that, I think that'd be a good thing. And
refresh me if I'm getting this, refresh my memory, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but you're also interested in seeing if maybe they can make some more concrete gains moving forward, right? They just won that special election, which I guess is a second item if we're looking for a trend, but we need 3 items really to establish a trend. They've got a Senate race coming up, right, where they could use a strong challenger against Elizabeth Warren. Do you think they're going to get one?
I doubt that. to
doubt
be
it?
honest. But it's more like at the state level. And I mean, it's not like I'm necessarily rooting for them. I just think it'd be interesting to see if it could happen. Peter Durant won that state Senate seat. There are now 4 Senate Republicans, 24 in the House. It would show maybe that the center is moving a little bit, or that politics in Massachusetts is moving a little bit, if they could win that House seat. I think winning someone a seat in Congress or the Senate would be highly unlikely, but I could be wrong.
Mike, do you agree with Joan's rather pessimistic assessment? Close out?
Yeah, certainly. She's right. There really aren't any races. There's no one really coming up. If Warren does draw a challenger, is that challenger going to be from the Trump side of the party or from, the Charlie Baker side of the party? That will kind of indicate which way, this current batch of Republicans or who are they going to support. On Beacon Hill, we're definitely looking at what the GOP will be like as far as the loyal opposition, so to speak, when it comes to Governor Healey's agenda, and to Joan's point, to kind of fight back against the lack of transparency that the Democratic leaders kind of run the place with.
Ron Mitchell, it occurred to me when I was trying to think of a third item that we could maybe cite, or that I could cite to establish a trend of Republican momentum, that we do have Republicans working with people on the far left to back State Auditor Diana DeZoglio's push for this ballot question that would let her audit the legislature. So to Joan's point about transparency, that's another interesting wrinkle in the way things are working under Amy Carnevale. Do you have any sense that the GOP is primed to, if not, make Democrats super uncomfortable or sweat, that they're headed in the right direction compared to where they have been in the past few years?
Well, I don't know that I should represent the GOP's perspective, but I think that from the outside looking in, I think that the national GOP has tanked so bad with their trends, away from women's rights, away from civil rights, away from educational rights and LGBTQ rights, that it would be hard-pressed for this Republican Party or any Republican Party in this state to really make inroads. I think because the overall national trends are so overwhelming that they really have an uphill battle. I think that more transparency and requesting more transparency and encouraging the auditor to be able to audit the state legislature, I believe that's what you said.
Yep.
I think that overall is something that everybody could get behind because, checking the boxes and reviewing everything is often a good thing. But I just think that they have a hard way to go, because of the national trends and how hard, it is for them to get out from under that cloud.
Alberto, back to your original story, the migrant crisis and the way it's going to shake out. You think that?
Look, I'm going to tell you something. If we were on the Back to the Future and I had a DeLorean and I could take Joan into the future, you would see how many more Latinos will become Republicans. I'm going to give you the biggest nuance. Why are Cuban Americans predominantly Republican? They're fleeing a left-wing government, dictatorship, socialism. What is the biggest group that we've had come in the migrants? Venezuelans fleeing the situation in Venezuela. So that next generation is going to be much more open to the Republican or more conservative point of view, especially when it comes to foreign affairs. That's why Biden was promoted as a socialist and a communist in South Florida. That's going to be more appealing to this massive amount of Venezuelans who have come into the United States and are continuing to come in.
Mike Dean, I know you want to talk about state-level stuff as well. Before you get into your particular story, I want to just roll a graphic that we have when it comes to that points up what people want when it comes to policy making from Governor Healey and from members of the legislature. It was an October poll done by UMass Amherst, your alma mater. A plurality of respondents said housing affordability was the top issue they wanted the governor and the legislature to address in 2024. Behind that, we had immigration, which we've talked about, and homelessness. So against that backdrop, what is your big story to watch in the new year?
It really is how the Healey agenda coalesces in the coming year. I think the State of the Commonwealth address is going to be our big first early indicator of what the governor actually wants to get done this year. There's, of course, extremely limited capacity for lawmaking on Beacon Hill these days. It is, going to be over in June, so everything kind of has to come down in the spring. How she uses that bully pulpit, really for the first time. this year, because it was the first year of a 2-year session, nothing really came to a head. She had a few wins, and she kind of is biding her time on some of the other kind of big swings. If she comes out in that speech and says that, you know, she really wants to push her version of the housing bill, and there are certain provisions that she needs to get done in her plan, that means that the legislature may have to take a back seat. I'm not sure how well that's going to go. There are other issues where lawmakers are so entrenched in their own, you know, conflicts with each other, healthcare, for instance, that I don't think Healey could really push them to do anything that she wants on certain things like that. But then if you look at that poll with, you know, homelessness and housing and the migrant crisis being the top 3 issues, they're all pretty much linked up when it comes to, you know, how we house people and how expensive it is to live here. That's going to be the highest, you know, priority for Healey and for lawmakers. And it really still, we don't know whether or not this is going to be the Healey plan or it's going to be, you know, the legislature's reworking of that plan that actually becomes law.
Joan, what's your prediction? Because as Mike says, there's really not a lot of time left. I mean, to deal with an issue as complex as housing and all the provisions she has suggested between now and the start of the summer, it's barely anything.
Well, let's put it this way. I'll be interested to see how she uses the bully pulpit, just like Mike said. I mean, because she really hasn't done that this first year. I know where she stands on abortion. On issues like that, you know, she's really out there and she's very clear and you know exactly what she wants to happen. On other things, I think it's less clear. So I'm looking for a change of style, I guess, and I'll see if that happens.
Alberto and Ron, when I saw the governor pitching her housing plan, I thought it was the most animated I'd seen her on any issue, with the possible exception, Joan, of abortion and abortion rights. Do you think that the public will be frustrated if collectively Beacon Hill can't get something big done on housing?
Absolutely, especially since we touted it so much from the beginning. You know, we touted it, at least in the Latino media, as, look, this is a major, major achievement. This is what we've been waiting for to see. So absolutely. Yeah.
I really think so as well. I mean, housing is a quality of life issue for all communities. And the cost of living in Massachusetts is so high that not coming up with a solution for this after rolling it out this way would be detrimental. And I also feel, like you were saying, the governor's level of focus and intensity about this issue. When you commit that much of your personal well, I'm not too personal, but when you commit that much of your professional time and effort on identifying and coming up with solutions, I just don't think it's going to fall by the wayside. I think something will get done. All
right, we've got 4 minutes left for a lightning round of sorts. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to work, so I'm just going to throw stuff out quickly, and we'll go, I guess, around the horn. If you want to comment, that's great. If you don't want to comment, that's fine, too. The Boston Globe recently named T-Riders as their People of the Year, saying these commuters are the red blood cells traveling the arteries of our city's beating heart. To ride now is to keep the city and region alive, pumping dollars into businesses and museums and universities. Mike Dean, is the T going to get better enough that people don't need to be patted on the head for riding it?
It very well could. That's another thing that is going to be a big part of the Healey agenda. As we saw, it wasn't in that top 3 issues poll there. People kind of, maybe transportation has dropped off in light of kind of the other issues that are going wrong in the state. The MBTA is still significantly underfunded, according to a lot of people who have plans to change the MBTA. And we now have a transportation secretary who was the leading advocate for increasing revenues to the T when she served on the T board. Does that translate into a big push from the governor? Is that going to make it into the State of the Commonwealth speech? Is that going to be, as the bully pulpit is used? We don't really know. The governor has things she wants to get done, but we just do not know what she's going to prioritize.
Okay, it turns out you give the only answer on this one. I apologize to everyone else. Joan, I'm going to you next. Is Joe Biden going to end up being damaged by the New Hampshire primary, in which he is not participating after the Democrats tried to demote New Hampshire, and New Hampshire refused to go with that and insist on going first? Is he going to be hurt?
Yes, I think he could be hurt by it. He's been hurt by a lot of things lately, and that's one more thing. I mean, how many people are going to turn out to write his name on the ballot. I mean, it's a confusing scenario that does not help him.
Very confusing. We've got, we should say, Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips, who are running against him, whose names will be on the ballot. And I'm going to ask you two, I think, to tackle this last question together. Will the Boston City Council, which has seen some big turnover, some longtime incumbents leaving, some new faces coming on, and also got a lot of bad press in the past year, is it going to stop being regarded by critical outsiders as a clown show in 2024?
Depends on their behavior.
Yeah.
You've got this new crop of folks coming in, and a lot of them ran on bringing back civility.
Yep.
You had them here on the show. I heard them all.
We did.
And say, I want to bring back, the ability to agree to disagree civilly without it getting personal, without it getting racial. Let's bring that back. Absolutely.
And I think the scrutiny and the level of attention that the City Council has gotten recently has motivated them within themselves to change the tenor. As they say, it's okay to disagree, but don't be disagreeable. And I think we've seen a lot of disagreeable activity in that chamber for a long, in the recent past. So I think they're focused on changing that tenor and that attitude.
All right, I lied. We've got time for each of you to weigh in super quickly on the Boston City Council question, which I'm fascinated by. Joan, are they going to head in a different direction?
I hope they're more civil. I hope they just aren't a rubber stamp for the mayor, the new people. I hope they show independence.
Many of whom were elected with her assistance. And Mike Dean, you get the final word here.
Yeah, I agree with Joan. A less conflict-bound city council could simply just become the rubber stamp for the Wu administration's policies, and we hear less of them because there's less conflict, which could actually probably be detrimental to their impact, pushing back against the administration.
All right, Mike Dean, Joan Vanacky, Alberto Vasallo, and Ron Mitchell, thank you all for being here in one way, shape, or form to kick this around. Appreciate it.